Hi, this is Linda Noss, and this is video number 7 of the concentration game series. In this video, I'm going to talk to you about the changes I've made in the grid object. And I've made quite a few. So basically, I have at the top of my grid object the members of the instance variables. I have a button, a two-dimensional button object. And remember in the previous videos, the buttons have basically changed to be one image, or an image that can change from a front to a back, thus flipping the button. But here we are, I'm creating a two-dimensional array out of it. This is going to keep track of when I use my random number generator, which I'm going to talk about quite a bit in this video. It's going to keep track of what random numbers I've already used up, so I can't pick them more than twice. This one right here, these two buttons are going to allow me to store the two buttons that I'm comparing. So let me just make a note of that here. Because once I click on a button, I have to store that information. So when I click on the second button, I can compare those two buttons. My counter keeps me on track, so I compare the two buttons. The ID numbers are what I compare about the buttons, so that determines whether they're equal or not. The rows and columns are the number of rows and columns in the two-dimensional array, and then I have my X of my grid, my Y of my grid, my width of my grid, and my height of my grid, and then I have a counter, and then I have a Boolean variable that's just basically going to be used to determine if there's a match or not. So do the two buttons match, and basically then I have to keep track of where when I click on the first button, I got to keep that one in memory, but I also have to know what the X and Y coordinate or the I and J, what part of the grid it's in. So I'm going to keep that. Haven't really played with the score yet. That's probably the last thing I implement, but essentially that's the list of variables that I have changed in the grid. So this is the beginning of my grid. See if I can fit them all in here, and here it is. This is all my instance variables and my members that I ended up using. Okay, let's talk about the random. Well, the second thing I want to talk about is the fact that I had you guys put in a constructor for your picture grid, and then you also had a button constructor, but we've taken the buttons out of there and made each button actually a series of pictures. So I'm going back to my original constructor where I have just the rows and columns, the X, the Y, the width, and the height. And I've added a few things to it. I think we had the rows and columns in there before, but this is a new thing right here, taken. If you have a 4x4 grid, then you need that 16 places in the grid, which means you need 8 pictures. So the way I figure out how many pictures I need is I take the number of rows times the number of columns and I divide it by 2. So that will give me the number of elements in the taken array. And this will help me keep track of how many pairs I've already picked randomly. And this will also allow me to make my grid bigger or smaller depending on what I want to do. My counter set equal to 0. So I basically take all those instance variables and set them equal to the parameters if I have parameters coming in. At this point in time, the counter is equal to 0 because I haven't counted anything yet. This is a count that keeps track of my flip. I haven't matched anything yet. The score is 0. The ID numbers, I kind of made them really big and really so that they can't possibly be anywhere near my ID numbers will go from 0 to 20 depending on 19 depending on how I use my images. And then I have my two button objects, which are going to store the two buttons that I'm going to be comparing, but you'll notice that I don't know any information about them, so that's why I created that second constructor in the button method with nothing in it. So when this is used right here, the computer's going to see the new, and it's going to see button, and it's going to look for a constructor with nothing in there. So then it's going to jump over to the button, and it's going to use this button constructor right here, which you can see does not set up anything on the button. So this is kind of just like a pointer or a button that is kind of sitting there, but it doesn't really have any data in it. And then I have my array, my two-dimensional array, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to load that array with the x and the y coordinates, the width and the height of each button, and then I'm going to pick random numbers to put in there. What this pick random does is it picks a random number, which allows me to pick a random picture to put in there. Now the problem with the random pick is that once I pick a picture, I can only pick that picture one more time. So I have to limit the number of times I use a picture to twice. So down here, I created this little random number method. It's called pick random. And what I do is I initialize an integer, and that stands for random number. And then what happens is I pick a random number. And since I only have 8 pictures, I could have put here, to keep everything nice and handy, rows times columns divided by 2, okay, in case my grid gets larger. Essentially, this is the number of pictures that I'm going to be using in my entire game. So I'm picking a random number between 0 and 7 because this would be 8 and 8's not used in the random number generator. And remember, random brings back a float or a decimal number, so I have to int it on the outside to make it a whole number. So that'll give me a random number between 0 and 8. Now, here's the deal. I am going to be counting these numbers. Taken Rn starts off at 0, but if I pick a random number, if I've already picked the number twice, I can't pick that number again because I've already used that picture twice. So I have a do loop here that keeps going around, and if I pick like, let's just say number 6, and then I pick 5 and 3, and I come around and pick the number 6, and then I pick a few more numbers, then it picks 6 again, it'll see that 6 has already been picked twice. So it won't let me pick 6 again. So it'll go around and pick another number. And once I have a number picked that is 2 or less, then it takes that number, sets the part of the array to it, and returns it back to my main program. So this number here returns it back to the main program, and then that's where it goes right there. So this random number generator allows me to only pick each picture twice. So that's what it does. So then I have my display method, which I'm going to tell you is not working 100% right now. I'm trying to get the clicks to work, and I'm not really sure why they're not working, but here's my display method from my grid. Maybe we can help each other with this to see why when I roll over the grid, it doesn't really do what I want it to do just yet. It does one, but then it does not do another one. So I have to figure out why it's doing that. Then there's my matching. Do both images have the same image? So this matched method I think you'll probably use. You're comparing the two IDs of the two different buttons. Here is my click method, which this is not working 100%. You can see that when I ran it, it only clicked once. It doesn't count the other click. So the whole idea is you want to click one of the buttons, and then if the count is 1, if it's the first time I've clicked it, and I've also pressed the mouse, then I want to store that button. So whatever place I clicked, whatever of the 16 buttons I clicked on, it's going to store that in a new variable called button 1. So it puts aside the first button so I can make sure I have it. And then I have to make sure that, remember, the button 1 had no ID or no anything. So I just got to make sure that that sets it up. Now when you use the equals method with the button, what happens is it takes button 1 and sets all the parts of pick ij, which is one button, equal to button 1, and that's what equals does. So if we quickly go over and look at equals, you will see that, see when I use equals, if I say button 1 equals a different button, it takes all the parts of that button and sets them equal to whatever button it's coming in. So if this is pick IJ, then it's going to set all parts of pick IJ equal to the new buttons. That's why I wanted to write that method. Then I got to record the ID, because the IDs are going to tell me if I have the same button or not. And then I started printing things out. This is a little method that I use to, you can see some printouts down here to debug the program. My program is not working yet 100%, so I wanted to trace it through. So I started printing out the different variables to see how far it would get. And then I also have these two variables here that record where the first click was, where in the grid. What was I equal to and what was J equal to in the grid. Because the next time I click, this I and J are going to go away. So I have to record it and keep it handy. And then I set my count equal to 2. So when I count again, it says if count equals 1, well, it's not going to equal 1, it's going to equal 2. So it should go to the else. Tell me the mouse press is false. Go through and do all the same stuff that I did for the first button, but I'm doing it for the second button. And then I check to see if they're matching or not. If the two buttons are matching, then it should blank them out. So when I go to display them again, those buttons do not appear because they're blanked out. And that's essentially what I've got so far on the grid. So go ahead and type this stuff in, and then we can maybe as a class decide how to proceed next. We'll see you later, and we'll talk to you later about what the requirements are for this final program.